The Dancing with Depression podcast is brought to you by CAS-CM, where CM stands for Content Matters, because content brings people together. Welcome back to Dancing with Depression. I'm your host, Adam Turner, and this is part 3, the final episode of my conversation with Mark. Up to this point, you've heard pieces of Mark's story, his service, his perspective, his willingness to have conversations that don't aim to convince, but to help understand. You've heard what it looks like to show up honestly, even when the answers aren't simple. Today's episode goes somewhere deeper, needed, appreciated, and provides a priceless lesson. Not to mention, there's a moment in the conversation that's difficult to hear, if lazy. Not because it's shocking, but because it's visual and real. It's one of those moments that asks you to pause, sit with discomfort, and really listen. Let's dive into the final episode.
Let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer it all, right? But what do you think about this current event? And as delicate as I could put it, and try to be as honest, but also in a light that I don't want to tell you how to think, right? Like, I don't want to say, that's crazy, this shouldn't happen, or that political side is only saying that because of this. It was to kind of give you like some backstory and let you decide on your own, how you feel about it. Because you and I are, we come from similar backgrounds in similar parts of the country and, have similar interests, but we're totally different. And, something that you may vote for because it's best for you is totally bad for me or my family or my grandson or things like that, where what's best for one is not always best for all. And what's best for all is a lot of times not what's best for one. And knowing sometimes like, hey, it may not be in my best interest to do this, but it's in the company, the team, whatever the country's best interest. So if that's where you were going with that, I'm sorry to interject, but.
No, that was incredibly powerful and greatly appreciated because I think, we do need to think for ourselves. And I do find that in many cases, myself, I'm just looking for an answer. But I think it's important to understand where things are coming from, what perspective they're coming from, because that can play a factor in the meaning of that particular content. I was going down a slightly different road, but I'm so glad we went down that one. What I was going to ask is what your thoughts were in why someone that was so interested in sports to the point where you wouldn't wear underwear when you went to a professional Steelers game. Is that not true? Did you wear underwear when you went to the games?
So if you're wearing
you were wearing a kilt. Oh, that changes the fact that did you or did you not wear underwear? I'll save you from that. As you used to say to me,
this will be on the cutting floor, right? Like only Bobby will see this part.
Oh, no. This is going to be the intro to everything.
Did you wear underwear as the thumbnail?
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember how you used to answer it, which is, I wore a kilt. I believe you said something like, in the traditional way a kilt should be worn, something like that.
Yeah, I'm big on history and tradition.
Right. So that being said, all kidding aside, sports was a big part, both playing and enjoying, but recently, several years ago, you kind of steered away from that. Is there anything specific to that, or am I just looking into it? Because I'm not trying to
Um,
find something. I just thought it was pretty interesting.
yeah, I mean, there were several things. It wasn't just one specific thing, that I was like, "Okay, I'm done." But, when you bring politics into entertainment, whether it's, a singer, athletics, whatever it is, I don't feel that that's, you know, you have a platform and, then you should, use your own platform, not something that you're doing, your job. Like I couldn't do the same thing at my job. I couldn't come out and say those things. That was a big thing, when the politics kind of came in, and that was huge. But also, when I look at a lot of the professional athletes, and not saying this didn't happen before, but again, in the social media era, that when you hear things about these so-called role models, that I didn't want to have my son look at, a football player, a basketball player, or whatever it was, and be like, "Oh, well, he just did this, and but you still like him because your team is winning or making money from that." Or maybe he does a year suspension and comes back, like taking your livelihood. If we were to do the same thing in corporate America, we would never work for that company again. And then it also became, like fantasy football. Like it was a 7-day a week ordeal. Like, I
Yes.
researched things, like, okay, so my kicker is playing in the NFC North, and so they're gonna be in a dome, so that's good. They can play in January because the weather's not gonna affect them. Like, you start breaking down statistics like that, or, this team's not great against the run or the pass, and so my defense might be a better play here than the other defense, so and when I finally did it, like, it was almost freeing. Like, I had 3 or 4 days, of 4, 5, 6 hours, and especially on the weekends, to myself. I was like, "Oh my god," like, I wasn't rushing home on Sunday morning, from the grocery store, because I didn't care. But, it wasn't one single thing that prompted, and there's still issues, and again, some of those issues that were brought up during that time are very valid. Some are, still there's teams that are saying, "Okay, you shouldn't have to wear a armband for or a ribbon, if it doesn't align with your particular beliefs." And, some, like, they couldn't even wear pink shoes or in support of breast cancer. And,
Mm,
because of the team. And again, that's going back to where politics are getting into areas that, I wasn't. And my daughter is my daughter because, she does the same thing. I wouldn't wear a certain brand of shoes because of, a research paper I did on child labor laws. And not that every other athletic shoe didn't do the same thing, but that one
right.
particular big one, and it doesn't mean, or, a gas station, in the Exxon Valdez, like, something happened there, and so I just made it my personal choice not to do that type of thing. And I think you asked me one time about the burning of a flag, how I felt, and
Yes.
to me, like, that, and I think I didn't give you the answer that you thought was coming, and I was like, I totally agree that if you wanna do that, you should be able to do that. In a free country, you should be able to express. Now, do I agree with that? And, like, do I think you're spitting on the graves of, every veteran that has served? That's a different story, but you can't do that in China. You can't do that in Russia. And hopefully, just because I don't agree with it, again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the right or the ability to do those things.
Yeah, and I think that's another powerful position in the sense of understanding and thinking for yourself as to why you're doing something plays a big role. And again, I'm not going to try and compare and contrast, but it reminds me of a conversation where I wanted to get a tattoo and shared that with my dad. And based off of his beliefs in Jewish faith, like, it's not something you do. And there was information that was provided to me that I understood why, but not necessarily feeling that that was enough, right? And again, I think it's perspective and so on. But the other thing that I was interested in, and as far as your experience, you talked about, you know, essentially your best friends you're serving with.
Mhm.
And, there's obviously a camaraderie that I don't have to even try to explain because it's just that strong. But what are some things that you saw along the years that maybe you didn't experience, but you experienced through some of those deep
Mhm.
connections and relationships?
Yeah. So as we get older, life happens and, the circle of life, you come and like if you're 20 years old and you're killed in a combat situation, it's like, okay, that's expected. But as we get older, late 40s, early 50s, there's been quite a few of my friends that have passed away recently. Some couple with suicide and others that may have almost lived a life to bring about an earlier passing than they would if they had lived a life clean and healthy. And so some of the guys that you see, like one of my friends that committed suicide, I saw him. We went to a Steeler game up in Cincinnati and he was there, and I was the last picture together, like we did a selfie, and I had no idea the things that he went through. And I didn't find out, like, the game was Sunday evening, and then his wife sent me a text or a Facebook message, like, Tuesday morning at, like, 2:30 in the morning, and I woke up to it that he had committed suicide. And he, was one of my troops, and I felt guilty because I didn't see it. And it was tough, dealing with that. And, like, I couldn't even go to the funeral, to the point because, like, I felt guilty that I didn't see it. And could I have done anything? Probably not. Like, anything I could have said or done, wouldn't have mattered, because a lot of times when you get to that point, you're not thinking rationally and you think that your family's better off without you. And like that depression hits. And a lot of times you think that, like, oh, you'll be better off without me. And sometimes that's true. Like parents that are together, like bad parents, a bad marriage may not be good for a kid, but in this case, like, there's nothing like, and our friends still talk about it. His birthday is a day I went into the Marine Corps. So, I know that date and every year, I think about him, not just that day, but other things. So those are things that you think about. And like I said, my dad was a World War II vet. And, sometimes old age, I think is a curse because, he lost every single one of his friends. He was the last one to go, and not saying that, it's tough to deal with, but, you almost have to do the celebration of life and think about good things and, the mental health of like, how do I take that one incident and make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else? There's on the 22nd of every month, there's a buddy check-in, and it pops up on my phone, and I reach out to somebody and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" And it doesn't even have to be a military guy, it's someone that, maybe you're looking out and be like, "Hey, I wonder how Adam's doing. Let me call." But it shouldn't just be on the 22nd. People will call and check in on you, and you're thinking, "Oh, well, let's go have lunch." And then you're like, life gets in the way and, it doesn't happen. And next thing you know, like you missed an opportunity. So those are things that, life is glorious. Life is great, the majority of time for a lot of people. But, there are people out there that, have PTSD or have depression or have injuries that you don't even think about. And because you don't see it, it's not something that, depression, it's not like, oh, my friend looked, fun and we were laughing and joking. And, I was talking to someone, I was like, sometimes like, going through the VA, it's almost like I wish my leg was blown off so that people would be like, "Oh, at least that's visible. You see that injury." So, that it's there. But, if you're walking in and you're healthy and you look healthy, you don't know what people are going through at that point. And
Yeah.
sometimes it takes just someone reaching out and be like, "Hey, how you been?" Or you see something. Like I'm big on Facebook birthdays,
Mhm.
because you don't know what's happened in the last year. But if you see, and Facebook makes it so easy, it's like, you post now, you don't even have to type anything. You just hit send. Unless you don't like that necessary greeting, you put it in. But I always thought, okay, at least I'm going to think about that person, once a year and they know that you're about them.
I think that's you know, might be challenging for somebody to hear first, but once you put it into context and they process it, it makes a little bit more sense when you said going to the VA, having your leg blown off where there's a visual where people can see it.
Mhm.
And I shared this when I was going through group therapy. Like, I literally felt like I wasn't worthy in the sense of the time that I was taking away from someone else who I felt was going through something more serious, right?
Mhm.
But I also learned in that very moment that it's all worth addressing. We all deserve that opportunity. And yes, visually you can see it clearer, but those that are dealing with things that they have to internalize obviously leads to an ending that none of us want. And
Mhm.
so, as we talked about experiences and this podcast and what it's designed for is it's designed for opportunities like this where they might not relate to my upbringing or my experiences, but they can relate to yours. And you can share that message of you're not alone. There are resources. Maybe you didn't take advantage of those resources because of the potential consequences when you first enlisted, but now it is okay and you
Mhm.
deserve that. And, that's what I want to encourage people to do is understand that it's okay. It's not something you did. It's things you experienced, whether you chose to experience them or not. And we all can benefit from sharing and helping others connect with the resources that they need. You've shared and dropped some knowledge, there's no question. And I know you've got a lot more to share. I want to kind of open it up just a little bit more freely and say, is there anything you want to mention or talk about or share, whether it was in the past or things that are going on now?
Yeah, like, again, I wanna thank you for bringing light to this because I know it's hard to when you start to look at yourself, right? Because we can always, like, "Oh, that guy, he's messed up, and at least I'm not as bad as him," or something like that. But when you realize, like, that to know yourself and seek improvement, and sometimes that's all it takes. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with that first step. You can't think about the 1,000 miles, you think about, one step or, as David Goggins will say, "Have you ever been too tired to walk 3 more steps?" Right? And so you just keep taking those 3 steps. So there's a lot of things out there, but I tried to do something, similar. I tried to do a YouTube channel and, fishing with veterans and going around and kind of doing the same thing, just talking with guys. But it's kind of hard when you're out trying to fish and talk and film. And so people see the podcast, they see the finished episode and, oh, this is episode number 99 and, it's like, oh, my YouTube channel or this and that, but, it's tough. But if it reaches one person, to help them, to reach out, to talk to somebody, it doesn't have to be me, it doesn't have to be you, just to talk and to take that first step, or take the lead, when you're dancing with depression or whatever you have, like just take that first step. You may step on some toes while you're dancing and, you may need a new dance partner once in a while or, someone to show you a different dance to deal with it. But, those are all things that people need to know they're not alone. And it doesn't matter if it's, one thought or you have the constant thought of depression and how do I get out of it? And when you look back at it, like I know you're 100 steps, from where you were even 6 months ago. And people don't see that either. In the Instagram and the content creator, like they see somebody that looks great in the gym, but they don't see them from 200 pounds, when before and now they're 150 pounds. They don't see,
Right.
what they were doing at the beginning of that. They
Yes.
see the end results. And sometimes, you're just working on yourself every single day and sometimes you'll backslide a little bit and sometimes you like, hey, okay, I need to get back on it. And whatever it is, as long as you try to be better than you were yesterday, even that, a lot of people say just 1% better than yesterday and or 0.5% or whatever it is, or even just trying to move, in that direction. So again, props to you because I know
Absolutely.
you're definitely, moving the right direction.
Thank you.
It's
But
all Bobby's, it's credit to Bobby, so.
well, obviously, but, I mean, I think most people that know me know that there's a lot of credit there and well deserved, right? I
Mhm.
mean,
And it should be your support system, right? It's tough to be out there by yourself. Many hands make light loads, and it is the support system, and you have a good one. So,
I
as long
do.
as you let people help you
Yes.
and don't be
Yes.
too proud, and, that goes for me as well, like, "Hey, do you need help?" "No, I'm good," and sometimes you're not good, and
Mhm.
accepting that, that olive branch or that, you know, glass of water when you're thirsty is something that most people, "No, I don't wanna seem weak," I don't need help from anybody, and when actually you might need some help.
And it's also, again, it's not weak, right? It's
Mhm.
perceived weakness
Right.
and it's drilled into, us in different ways.
It takes a stronger person to seek help
Yeah.
than someone who doesn't need help, right? Like, to actually get out and get help and or to do something knowing that, like people say, "Oh, I'd do anything to, you know, lose weight except eat right and go to the gym." You know?
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, you know what you have to do, but taking
Yes.
that first step to going to the gym and putting away the whatever it is that you're getting at the drive-through, you know, 3 times a day.
I've oftentimes related that to there is only a need, in my humble opinion, for one pill. And that pill just needs to be a discipline pill so that we do what it is that we know what needs to be done and you'll get the results. But again, thank you for sharing and opening up the light to in a time that was probably a combination of excited and, confusing and, you learned a lot from it. And I feel like there'll be more to talk about, but
Oh,
I
we
wanna
definitely kept it under 30 minutes.
yeah, no, absolutely. This is absolutely on its way to be the first three-part
Yeah,
episode. There's no question.
yeah,
So,
and you'll have to if you play this in twice the speed, we might get to 30 minutes.
hour and 17 minutes is where we're at. But
Yeah.
is anything else that you wanted to touch upon, cover, anything that did you wanna ask me anything? I usually ask that at the end, but
Yeah. When did you know? Like, at what point, like, for me, it wasn't just one thing that led me to stop watching pro sports. When did you know, like, "Hey, I need to take that step, to get help?"
Awesome question. Because I thought you were going to say, when did I realize that I was, depressed or whatever? But
Mm.
it was a couple of things, coincidentally or not coincidentally. But the bigger picture was I was on medication for my anxiety and depression, and it was helping me get through scenarios that I once wasn't able to get through. Little panic attacks, just was having a hard time. So I had been someone that never liked medication. I didn't like relying on it or whatever, but I was just at a point where I was like, I need relief because I just didn't see it coming anywhere else. Well, I didn't realize that I had been on that medication for 10 years. And I happened to be in a situation family wise where there was stuff going on that I just couldn't understand. I couldn't work through it. And I felt like I had lost myself in the sense of feelings and being able to be mad or be sad or everything in between. And I was getting frustrated. And so I made the decision to stop taking the medication. And I talk about this cold turkey. I stopped.
No.
Wasn't one of my brightest moments. However, it led to that answer to the question, which was I'm burnt out. I could not, I thought it was work burnout in the sense of I would finish one thing and 12 more things would be on my plate. But it was actually, I felt like I was drowning. And in doing so, when I went to therapy and incorporated psychiatrist for the medication side, because I was okay going back on some medication, but I didn't want it to be the only thing. And that timing of feeling like I was drowning, work was just a big component of it. And not talking to my parents because the phone felt heavy for no other reason. When I did talk to them, it was great. And just, I had internal conversations where I was like, I need to go do this, like take a shower, but my body's not doing it. Why? What's going on? And so when it all came to a head and it was recommended that I take some time away and get things figured out, the options were suggested to get some additional help. You've got time now, right?
Mhm.
And I know not everybody has this option, right? But that's when it happened. That's really when things started to click for me that I didn't have to rely on just medication, that there were things that I could do for myself. It wasn't going to remove the depression, it wasn't going to get rid of the anxiety, but it was going to help me navigate certain situations better and have that extreme feeling less frequently. And that felt like I had gained a little bit of control back that I didn't have before. And I believe that it's, I don't want to use the word easier, but it's more common that you crash before you wake up.
Mhm.
My hope is that with sharing stories with others and sharing resources with others and techniques, that people can get ahead of it and not have to crash in order for
Don't hit rock bottom before you can come up.
Yeah,
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 catch it before you fall. Yeah.
yeah. We talk about, like, you're trying to do different things and trying to be there for different people, and, our minds think about, wandering. I don't have time to think about that, but I think with a little bit more insight and connection and resources, I think we can move towards that, and that's what I'm hoping.
And knowing, like, there are things that will bring on, hopefully not very often for us, like losing a close friend, or, or your pet, or, something like that. Like, that's going to bring on those types of emotions, and, like, that's part of life, is knowing that it's not all, Facebook or Instagram, you know, good things. And sometimes when you do have those issues, or, incidents that happen, that it's isolated, it's not going to take you all the way down, that you can deal with those things. So, because ultimately, if you live long enough, you're going to have some of those issues, come in. But, like, how you deal with them to get back to reset to that, ground zero, so to speak, and move forward. But,
Exactly, exactly.
and when you recognize it, when you know, then it's easier to deal with the next time. It's like, okay, I've dealt with this, I can do it again. So I can come back.
100%.
Yeah.
And that is, in my humble opinion, where a lot of disconnect is that people, before I had gone to group therapy, I could not see any relief in sight. I was pretty confident that I was going to lose Bobby because I couldn't provide her what she deserved in a relationship. It wasn't about, like, you know, extreme things. They were pretty basic things that I couldn't provide her. And, you know, I think some people relate better when you talk about maybe somebody that is given a cancer diagnosis, or
Um,
somebody gets into a car accident and their lives change and they don't want to, quote unquote, hold that person back from living. And I kind of felt like that's what I was doing. To her credit, she was like, Dopey, you can do things to live again. I just need to know that you want to, and we'll work on it together. And she'd be yelling at me right now because I'm yelling because I'm excited. But that's the point where I didn't know. And I feel pretty confident that others don't know.
mhm,
And if we can get that information to them, then we're doing good.
mhm.
And that's feels good. And purpose is good.
Or
So
even just doing better,
better.
you know,
Yeah.
moving to good.
Yeah. I like that. As we come to the end of this conversation with Mark, I want to take a moment because this was never just a story about a retired Marine. This is about a man who has lived a full life, who raised a family, built deep connections, showed up for people, and, like so many of us, carried guilt and grief for the moments he couldn't see the pain others were struggling with until it was too late. What Mark shared wasn't easy to hear, and it wasn't meant to be, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty is what helps us recognize parts of ourselves we've been trying to put words to for a long time. Before we close, I want to share a small part of the process behind this podcast, because transparency matters. There's a moment in this conversation where Mark talks about why he decided to stop watching the NFL. Well, one of the reasons why. And yes, I joked with him about not wearing underwear to Steelers games, partly because Mark wasn't just a casual fan. The kilt was part of the outfit, it was part of the identity. Football wasn't just something he watched, it was woven into his routine, his history, and his sense of belonging. So When Mark shared his reasons for stepping away and the word politics came up, I paused. Not because the conversation wasn't honest, but because I wanted to be intentional. Every guest who joins me here has the unquestioned ability to remove or clarify anything before we share it with others. I haven't removed a topic yet, but this one made me reflect. Is this aligned with what Dancing with Depression exists to do? After sitting with it for a little bit, the answer was clear. It absolutely is. Part of Mark's decision, not the only factor, but an important one, was the presence of politics within an entertainment platform like the NFL. For him, it wasn't about disagreement with any specific message, but about believing there is a time, a place, and a more appropriate platform for those conversations to happen. When that line became blurred, it conflicted with the role football had always played in his life. As a place for connection, escape, and shared experience. What Mark shared wasn't about sports, teams, or a political side. It was about values, about recognizing when something you love no longer aligns with who you are, and having the courage to step away anyway. That's not an easy decision. Walking away from something that once brought joy often comes with loss, confusion, and even grief. But it's also a boundary, and boundaries are a powerful act of self-respect, especially when it comes to mental health. I'm very aware that conversations around mental health can be triggering, and so can topics like politics, religion, rights, and identity. We won't always agree, and we don't have to. What matters is this. If someone's lived experience, choices, and perspective align with the mission of the podcast to foster understanding, honesty, and connection, then it belongs here. This space welcomes nuance. It welcomes difference. And it welcomes conversations that may challenge us as long as they help us grow. If this conversation stayed with you, you're not alone. And if it brought up something difficult, I hope it also reminded you of the power of connection, of reaching out, checking in, and walking alongside one another instead of carrying things quietly. Mark, thank you for your service, for your friendship, and most importantly, for trusting this space with your story. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here, for listening with openness, and for continuing to show up for conversations that matter. And as always, when it comes to depression, remember to take the lead. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Dancing with Depression. There's a saying that hindsight is 20/20, which is often used to describe the phenomenon of being able to see things more clearly after they've happened. With that in mind, I encourage you to reflect back on past experiences in an effort to better understand your now. Also, I invite you to share with me your comments, thoughts, or personal exposure to depression. You can email me at dancingwithdepression@yahoo.com. Until next time, keep moving forward, and when it comes to depression, remember to take the lead. The Dancing with Depression podcast may include discussions of suicide, self-harm, trauma, and emotional distress. Listener discretion advised. This podcast shares personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional mental health care. If you need immediate support, call or text 988. Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. For non-crisis help and resources, contact NAMI at 1-800-950-6264.